Chapter 4. Arvid. Voices could be heard. They sounded distant at first, then Arvid realized the muffled conversations were in the same room as he. The effort to stay awake was taxing, and he soon drifted off. When next he woke, he became aware that he had been rescued and brought to safety. He was bandaged, and a warm hearth had been maintained around the clock. The face at his bedside changed every time he opened his eyes. He was aware that several days had passed, but he didn't know how many. This time, when he opened his eyes, he fought off the urge to sleep. He opened his mouth to speak, but his throat was too dry, and he only managed a whisper. "Hilo." A little girl who had been mindlessly jabbing at the coals in the hearth startled. Without one word, she ran out of the house, not even pausing to close the door behind her. From his vantage, Arvid gazed outside, looking for some signs of familiarity. The thatched roof, compacted dirt floor, and the smell of farm animals told him he was in a rural village. The shadows suggested early morning. His body was torn and broken, but that was the least of his worries. He had a fever, and few men survived it in his condition without the help of a healer. Before long, half a dozen men and women crowded the domicile. Someone must have recognized him as a royal. As the men removed their coverings, the women offered unpracticed curtsies. Equal amounts of fear and trepidation etched every face. Understandably, having a royal die in your care might not bode well. "My lord, I'm the landlord of this village," a small man with long black hair and a bald spot at the crown of his head said. He was middle-aged by northern standards, with a mustache that suggested he was from the Middle Lands. Although he had no accent, his demeanor and size were dead giveaways. "My furrier swore on his honor that you were one of the royals. Is that true?" Arvid nodded slightly. The room sighed collectively. "What is your name, my lord?" Arvid tried to speak, but coughed up yellow phlegm instead. He was handed a flagon of broth. Once the warm, fatty liquid made its way down his throat, he answered. "Arvid. He's a prince," a man confirmed from the back of the room. "Son of Asbjorn, third in line," the resident royal scholar said with certainty. The landlord's eyebrows raised in surprise. "Do you remember what happened?" It was a rude question to ask a man who had just awoken in his condition, but Arvid knew there was a chance he would not survive, and at some point someone would ask him that very same question. Arvid struggled to remember the details. "I found ye amongst the corpses of half a dozen wolves and the forest kings," a slender old man said. He spoke with his hands, making every revelation seem more dramatic. Those in the room who hadn't already heard the story gasped in amazement. King Stag died with a shot through the sides, the man illustrated by pointing to his own ribs. And Dasan, the man-killer, still had your sword poking through the top of his head. The man was not far off on his findings. He must be a tracker. But he added a bit of dramatics, saying how the pack was so fearful of the young man who'd killed their leader that they ran off in fear. It was a wondrous retelling. Arvid, lacking the strength or desire to correct the man, tilted his head, confirming the man's conclusions. The gathered men and women gasped in awe of the heroic tale. "If I haven't already introduced myself, I'm Lord Ernst. I lease these lands. I sent word of your discovery the day you arrived. We knew you to be a royal, but which one we were not certain. So word was sent to the capital that we believed we had found a royal gravely injured in the woods. They'll know which one by your description, no doubt." The man breathed deeply. "I'll be genuine with you, my lord. We didn't think you'd survive the night, much less the week. Many times I've seen people recover such as you, only to die suddenly hours or days later. If there is a message you want us to deliver in case of your passing, I've left ink and parchment near your bedside. Marissa knows her letters and will see your message accurately transcribed. I've also sent a messenger to collect your bounty for the killing of Dasan. The buck will be mounted, and I'll see its fur made into something appropriate for your deeds and stature." Lord Ernst continued speaking, but Arvid's eyes fell shut, and the heavy rise and fall of his chest signaled everyone to leave. Arvid was awakened by the chanting of healers. Judging by their dress, they were not from this village, likely from the surrounding villages. The fact that they'd worn masks was a sign his condition had not improved. Arvid didn't blame them, for if a royal dies in their care, the consequences could be dire. They simply wanted to stave off his death long enough for his family to see him off. If the healers were from the royal court, his fever would be a small formality. It was the only form of magic permitted this far north. Those with enough talent in healing usually moved closer to the capital. "Marissa," Arvid croaked. "My lord?" The girl who had been wiping him clean and cheering him on during the few bowel movements he had since becoming an invalid rushed to his side. He gestured to the parchment. When she was ready, he began his final testament. When he was done, she folded it and placed it under his pillow, a gesture usually reserved for people expected to recover. He wasn't, but he appreciated the gesture anyway. Sometime later, there was a commotion outside. A voice could be heard at the center of the village, yelling Arvid's family nickname. "Buck!" the voice screamed. "Buck?" The voice, strained with fear and uncertainty, repeated frantically until Marissa opened the cabin door. Aylin, not interested in the formalities associated with members of a royal family entering a village for the first time, pushed her way past Marissa without so much as an acknowledgement. Arvid smiled for the first time in weeks. He was shivering although the room was warm, and he was covered in layers of knitted blankets. She paused at the sight of her sickly brother. His eyes were sunken, his cheeks were as well, giving him a skeletal appearance. Arvid tried to speak, but no words came. Tears gathered at the outermost edges of his eyes. Aylin turned to retrieve the royal healers. By the time Ansa, the presumed future queen, arrived at her son's bedside, Aylin had already directed the necessary parties to where they were needed. "He may be too far gone, milady," the ancient man said the moment he laid eyes on Arvid. There were only a handful of healers in the entire north more esteemed than Archbishop Volmir. He was as pragmatic as he was old. He would not have the family getting their hopes up at the apparent lost cause. "I will do my best. Had we arrived days earlier—" Ansa silenced the archbishop with her raised finger. Aylin's furrowed brow and intense gaze flashed at the old man. His comments were seen as indifferent toward the dying noble. Arvid knew his chances were slim, but the confirmation must have been evident on his face. Realizing his face was glower, Arvid fixed it as best he could. "We will discuss his survival at a more private moment. For now, begin your work and allow me some time with my son." His mother hissed at the old man in a tone too loud to be a whisper, but subdued enough not to be heard easily. Without another word, the archbishop unpacked his wares and began his ceremony. Ansa said nothing to her firstborn son. She rubbed his scorching hot brow and hummed songs from his childhood. The archbishop used a scepter to channel divine energy into Arvid. To the untrained eye, it looked as if he was simply offering a prayer. For hours, things continued this way. Arvid showed no signs of improvement. Aylin replaced Marissa as the person replenishing the cool compress. Volmir started to falter as the hours grew longer. When night fell, it was decided a vigil would be held at Arvid's bedside. Ansa insisted on staying, but relinquished her position at Arvid's side. It seemed as though this night would be Arvid's last. Camilla, his wet nurse, Jourdain, his longtime teacher and physician, and an assortment of others close to him who were able to make the long trip on such short notice, all spent an hour or more at his side. Some loved Arvid, others never missed an opportunity to curry favor with the presumed future queen. After the procession of grievers finally came to an end, Ellen was left alone with her dying brother. He would have made a great king, she knew. He already favored his father with his long, thick black hair and sky-blue eyes. He was smaller than usual, with sunken eyes, and his skin hung loosely on his bones. He was 16 winters, 17 if he survived 2 more months. When healthy, most took him to be 20. Always chasing glory, he wanted to be like his father, Ansa lamented. As she grabbed his hand, she felt something. It was a familiar feeling. It felt as natural as breathing. Aylin looked over her shoulder at her mother, who was fast asleep. Aylin gripped her brother's hand more tightly. Her parents asked Aylin long ago to suppress her supernatural abilities. Magic that the northern gods didn't grant was outlawed. She demonstrated her mystical abilities at an early age. For years she suppressed her urges, but in moments when she was alone, she commanded the fish and birds. She sparked fires and commanded the fires like trained animals. When she dreamed, she saw what the wolves saw. So, when she held her brother's hand and she could feel every ounce of divine energy the bishop imparted into Arvid, she knew her brother was going to die. She closed her eyes and could feel a part of her flowing into her brother along the river of divine energy. Several dams were stopping the flow from continuing through his body uninterrupted. Elin visualized the obstructions as tree branches obstructing the flow of a river. If she brought enough of her own flow in, it might dislodge the obstruction, allowing the river to continue. Elin pushed. When the obstruction didn't move, she tried more forcefully. The branch was dislodged, but not enough to allow the free flow of divine energy. Sensing she had nothing to lose and everything to gain, she pushed with her whole might, and the flow utterly consumed the branch. She did this again and again. Eventually, the flow itself was so strong that it dislodged the obstruction with little or no help from her. Then Elin found herself back where she started. She was flowing back into herself. That is when she noticed she was being watched. Chapter 9. Arvid. The cracking of the fire awakened Ansa. It was the first time she had slept in 2 days. Still, she felt shame at not being alert while her son was in the room, dying. She sat up in hopes it would help her fight off sleep. She looked over to Elin, who appeared to be praying for her brother to pull through. Ansa stood and stretched her weary legs. 3 days in a carriage make even the most travelled person stiff. Ansa went to refresh Arvid's compress when she noticed Elin was glowing. She blinked reflexively, trying to clear her vision. Arvid was glowing as well. She drew closer, not sure what to do. She could see specks of white motes leaving Elin and travelling along their joined hands into Arvid. Arvid's appearance was heavenly. Gone were his sunken features. His lips, which had been fractured from dehydration, looked supple. His breathing was smooth, and all signs that he'd ever been in distress were gone. Elin noticed her mother's presence and almost stopped. She continued, fearful her mother would demand that she pull away. The order would never come. This was not holy magic, the two knew, or rather not granted by the All-Father. By law it was blasphemous and punishable by death. Elin would be drowned or burned or whatever horrible punishment the witch-finders could come up with. Ansa didn't implore her daughter to stop. Instead, she went to the door and stood lookout until Elin could finish her work. When morning came, Archbishop Volmir, accompanied by a few of his acolytes, who spent the night using their powers to restore his, stood agape at the sight of Arvid. Ansa placed her finger over her lips, beckoning silence. The boy, who was not yet a man, slept comfortably on his side. His pallor and gaunt features were just a memory. His raven-black hair, which was perpetually drenched in his own sweat, was now thick and full. His breath was easy, and there were no signs of fever. "He looks—" Archbishop Volmir had no words. He all but announced him dead the day before. "Yes, all thanks to you and the One above all," Ansa replied. The confused bishop allowed them to give him the credit. However, his astonishment was more disbelief than acceptance. "Has he awoken?" Volmir queried. "Not as of yet, but his condition has so greatly improved thanks to you. I suspect he will at any moment." Archbishop Volmir rolled up his sleeves and ordered all but Ansa and Marissa out of the room. He did a comprehensive examination of Arvid, who snored through most of it. His scars, his fever, even his broken arm. "It is as if he had never been injured in the first place," he said in disbelief. He grabbed Arvid's hand and closed off his mind to the world. He reached for his divine abilities only to have them rejected. It was like trying to pour ale into an already full flagon. He could sense his energy within, but it wasn't his alone. The density, purity, and sheer volume were greater than anything he could achieve. "This boy is healed," he declared loud enough for the people pretending not to be eavesdropping outside to hear. Arvid's eyes opened as if summoned by the archbishop's words. His mother and chambermaid fell on him immediately, followed by his sister. For the next 6 hours, he gave the fantastical retelling of how he survived an attack by a pack of timber wolves. Not his version, of course, but the version the old man had given when Arvid was barely able to speak. Complete with the hand movements and gestures, he even gave the alternate ending. He first said it for his family and close friends, twice more for the villagers who saved his life, a few more times for the aldermen. Lastly, for the noblemen and landlords of the area. Arvid took note that the archbishop didn't stay long enough for him to thank him properly, but considering his condition, the old man must have worn out. Arvid's funeral had to be converted to a feast. It was filled with traditional meals that were said to help usher the dead and had to be moved to the evening. It served as a reminder of how close to death he really was. That night, the villagers took his funeral pyre and assembled the largest bonfire he'd ever seen. The heat from the fire could probably melt steel. Your attention, I beg," Lord Ernst implored. "The young lord has donated the wealth of his catch to the village that found him and kept him warm whilst he recovered." A cheer went up, and Lord Ernst waited for the gathered crowd to settle. 9 dire wolf pelts, the bounty for the man-killer Dasan, and the pelt of the coveted king of the forest. The crowd erupted after each accomplishment was spoken. "And in honor of his deeds, we have a gift of our own." Lord Ernst signaled for one of his servants. A small man with a shaved head ran from behind the fire. A large garment was presented to him. "This cloak is made from the pelt of the king of the forest and the man-killer Dasan." All in attendance applauded loudly. It was a black capelet cloak. The fall was made of deer leather, and the shoulders were lined with Dasan's fur. The silhouette of a wolf and stag rearing toward the spine of the cloak was inlaid in silver. A master seamstress must have sewn the cloak for it to be dried, dyed, and masterfully sewn together in such time. It may have been hubris, but it was the best cloak Arvid, the son of a prince, had ever seen. It emitted an aura that projected awe on everyone who gazed upon it. All who inquired about its making would be told of his tale. The thought of him being buried in such a fine cloak briefly crossed his mind. Arvid could not think of a better gift, and accepted enthusiastically. "All hail Arvid, master of the forest," Lord Ernst said. "All hail Arvid," the crowd repeated deep into the night.